Hello, and welcome to Ending Physician Overwhelm. I'm your host, Dr. Megan Mello. I'm a family and obesity medicine physician, as well as a certified life coach for physicians. In this podcast, we talk about how the learned habits of people-pleasing, perfectionism, and a lack of boundaries show up in our lives and how they contribute to burnout, exhaustion, and overwhelm. The healthcare system is broken, my friends, but let's not wait for it to be fixed in order to feel better. Well, hello, my friends. Let me ask you a question. So people ask you questions all day long, but what are the questions that you are asking yourself? If you're like most of us, it could be a lot of, why me? WTF? What now? How am I going to manage? We face so many questions on a day-to-day basis, and yet we often do not ask ourselves the good questions, the questions that will actually help us. My friends, this is week 10 of our 10-week stress reduction challenge, the VIP Recharge Challenge. We are on a mission to help find ways to lower our stress levels, and this is going to be another place that we can turn the focus. So if you're just joining, you can certainly go back to week 1, which is episode 200 from October 28th. That is the first, but there's also no need to go in order. You can jump in here anywhere that you'd like. We are trying to help reduce stress in the day-to-day for us as physicians without waiting for the healthcare system to magically change. We are at the very end of 2025, and this year has been like no other. We could point to a lot of reasons why that's true. We could point to all sorts of challenges that we are anticipating in the new year. But for here today, we are just going to focus on something that we can control because, of course, that's the place where we can have the most impact, is over the things that we can actually control in our lives. So when we are asking ourselves these not amazing questions, why me? What now? They are questions in that, there's a question mark on the end, right? There's an inflection that goes along with a question. But the problem is they're not actually questions. We aren't actually asking ourselves a question that can be answered, right? What those questions are is an expression of an emotion, and we are choosing to couch it in the language of a question, but it's not a question with an answer. When we are asking ourselves a question that we can't answer, what happens? We're just staying stuck. Whatever that emotion is, whether it's frustration, resentment, it could be overwhelm, it could be exhaustion, we are just going to stay stuck in it because we can't actually answer the question and move through it. So without knowing it, we are unwittingly perpetuating whatever it is, rather than moving through it. Now, it's very important that as we talk about this today, we are not gaslighting ourselves into thinking that we are the problem. My friends, we are not the problem. And yet, our conditioned thinking has been programmed over many years. Our thoughts around who we are, what we should be doing, whose responsibilities are what within the professional and the home spheres, right? Those are a culmination of many, many years of programming where we have been led to believe that we should be providing all the care, all the service. We should be, just endlessly fulfilled by the care that we're providing and not ask for anything, right? We worked so hard to get here. The healthcare system is built off of our backs, right? Making us believe that, we're selfish if we say no or set boundaries, or we're not satisfied with the increasing demands and the decreasing support, right? That's all baked in here. So we are not gaslighting ourselves into believing that we are the problem. And yet, if we do not spend time addressing the conditioned thought patterns and seeing how our programming has left us without the ability to really explore our thoughts and feelings and, acknowledge that we have feelings like all humans, then we will stay stuck no matter what happens. The healthcare system could magically redesign itself and we would be stuck in the very same thought patterns, right? We could choose to leave medicine and we will again be stuck in the very same thought patterns that have us overworking, constantly hustling for approval, and constantly doing better, 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 always seeking to finally feel good. We have to spend time really digging into our thought patterns, really understanding our emotional states, and learning how to tend to ourselves so that we can have a better experience. And it starts with questions. Now, we are currently perhaps getting stuck in asking ourselves not helpful questions, questions that are not really questions. What I'd like you to recognize, though, is that as physicians, is our superpower? Our superpowers are questions. We are very good at asking questions. We are very good at being curious about what is going on in the lives and bodies of our patients. We are trying to find answers. We are expert problem solvers. We are generally not turning that superpower to our own benefit. I'm going to invite us to start doing that because that is where the magic is, right? When we can start really reflecting on how we think, how we feel, what our values are, that allows us to create more space in our lives. It allows us to set different priorities and boundaries. It allows us to decide what's okay and what's not okay. How am I going to be here? How am I going to show up? Who do I want to be in this scenario, right? And these are all really, really important questions. Um, when we are tired, when we are frustrated, when we are stuck in overwhelm, we will curtail the process of asking questions. We have been taught to not ask ourselves questions, right? Am I tired? Can I keep going? Do I need to go to the bathroom? Right? We have been taught often, implicitly and not explicitly, to ignore ourselves, to not check in with our bodies, to not check in with our emotions because we need to keep going in service of the patient. As we have discussed many times, yeah, when we're in the middle of a code or, something's going wrong in a surgery, when we're in a very difficult discussion, that's probably not the time that we're going to break away and go to the bathroom, right? It's probably not the time we're going to put up our hand and say, you know what, it's time for a coffee break. I'm thirsty. And we can't use that as justification for chronically not taking care of ourselves, right? If you are someone who does surgeries that typically take 14 hours, and I know that some of you do, you are going to need to find a way to figure out when is the time to take a break. When is the time for me to scrub out, go to the bathroom, drink some water, drink some coffee, have a snack, right? Shake my hands out so that I get to go back into the rest of the surgery somewhat refreshed. Is it inconvenient? I'm sure it is. Now, I am not one of these surgeons, right? I'm sure it's inconvenient when we think, okay, this person's body is open. I am the surgeon. I am the one doing the surgery. And yet, 14 hours is a really long time to stand there, right? And be doing complicated surgery. That person needs to take a break. They need to be able to ask themselves, when is the good time for me to take a break? Not whether or not they should take one, right? When we are tired and frustrated, we will curtail asking ourselves questions because we believe that we shouldn't do it. We believe that we should keep going. We should believe that we should, persevere and persist. And that is harming us. So, what is the way? We need to get used to slowing down, asking ourselves questions, and really allowing ourselves to answer them because we're pretty good at answering questions too. You get questions all day, every day. You deserve the chance to answer these questions. So, In this last phase of the challenge, we are simply going to be starting to ask ourselves questions that have a light to helping us, that have a light to learn something about ourselves, to realize some needs that are not being met, to realize where we're living out of alignment with our values. That is the work this week. Now, if you've been with us from the beginning, you know that we worked on a lot of different small stress reducing challenges. We have done things including sleep meditation called Yoga Nidra. We have worked on our breath. We have worked on improving our sleep. We have worked on rhythmic movement. We have incorporated greens and berries into our diet. We have practiced laughter. We have practiced gratitude, right? We have focused on a lot of different areas. And this week, it's all about starting to ask yourself better questions. So I'm going to read through a list of questions that I just spitballed. I just came up with these. These are sometimes informed by my coaching background. They're sometimes questions that I've been asking myself. Sometimes questions that I've culled from, authors and psychologists and people who are in this field. I will have a list of these questions available for you in the show notes, so don't feel like you have to write them down, but I just want you to listen. Listen to the tone of these questions and figure out, these sound like some questions that I want to start asking myself, and figure out how you're going to do that. Are you going to take them and, sit down and write them out? Are you going to, pause the podcast while you're out on your walk and answer each question? You could have a dialogue with yourself, right? There are a lot of different ways. You could start journaling. The point here is that you find some way to start asking yourself better questions on a regular basis with the intention of using your answers to reshape the way that you're living your life. We are not going to solve the healthcare challenge from the top down. I would absolutely 100% argue that that's what I want, right? That I want big change from the top. And yet, I'm not waiting for us to be there, and I don't think that you can afford to wait either. We will, each of us, need to start doing some of this work internally, starting to live in better alignment with values, starting to practice boundaries, starting to take radically good care of ourselves so that we can show up and work in this broken healthcare system if we choose to, so that we can set healthy limits and boundaries and, be the high quality professionals that we want to be, so that we can innovate and choose to trust ourselves and find other ways of practicing if we're not going to be a part of the big healthcare system, so that we can use our gifts and talents. That is what I want for you. I want you to be able to enjoy the life that you lead. I want you, if you choose to continue in medicine, to use all this knowledge and skill to better the health of your patients, whatever arena that takes place in, right? It doesn't matter what part of the body you serve. It doesn't matter, the setting that you provide the care in. Maybe you're someone who is out here on social media talking and sharing important health information with people, and that's the way you serve people. Perhaps you're in a traditional employed practice and you see patients all day, all the time, but you need to take better care of yourself within that setting. Perhaps you are, starting out on your own, or you have your own business where you take care of patients. That could be a direct care model. It could be a cash pay practice that is otherwise different. It could be an insurance-based model. No matter what you are doing, we need you to use your gifts and talents. And in order to do that, I believe we need to ask ourselves better questions, right? When I do coaching work with people, it's all about questions. When you work with a therapist, it's all about questions. When you are working to help improve your learning, it's all about questions. All right. So without further ado, here are some questions that I invite you to start asking yourself. You don't need to ask yourself all of them. You don't need to ask yourself any of these. You can make up your own. You can use tools. You can use books. You can sign up to work with a coach. You can do anything that you choose. But here's my list. What am I feeling right now? What thoughts in my head are leading me to feel this way? Now, it's important with this question that we recognize that our thoughts create our feelings. Circumstances happen, right? We observe something, we hear something, we see something, something has happened. That could be a double book on your schedule. It could be a complication that arises during surgery, right? There is something that happened, that occurred, that we can all observe. We have thoughts about it, and then we have feelings. Our thoughts are sometimes so quick that we don't recognize them as thoughts, that they just flash through our brain and create an emotion. But it is not the thing that happened that created it, it is the thought. And without gaslighting ourselves into thinking that we are, responsible, that we are culpable, that we are guilty of causing our feelings, we want to be able to identify what is the thought that led me to feel that way, right? If I see a double book on my schedule and I'm instantly mad, my thought is probably, they can't do that to me. They shouldn't have done that. That's against the rules. How dare they, right? I'm having some kind of a thought that is creating the emotion because somebody else might have a completely different emotion. Maybe they're really happy because they look forward to seeing that patient. They know that patient has been trying to get in and somebody found a slot for them, right? That might be a stretch for you to believe that, but it is possible. And therefore, we know that our thoughts create the emotions, right? It's not the double book. It's our thoughts about the double book and the emotion that it creates. Don't gaslight yourself into blaming yourself if you choose to feel mad, right? Choose is not maybe the right word there. If you are mad, do not blame yourself for that. But we need to identify what is the thought so that we can start to figure out what the next step is. All right, so that was a lot of exposition, but what thoughts in my head are leading me to feel this way without gaslighting ourselves? What do I need right now? What are my top 3 values? This is a deep one, right? But sometimes we need to sit down and figure out what are my values right here in this phase of my life. And the next question, am I living in alignment with those values? You may feel, for example, that your family comes first. And yet if you look at the way that your day-to-day is organized, you see that no, we can't tell that that's true at all. Now, obviously that is going to be not an easy fix. And yet we will not be happy and fulfilled if we are living out of alignment with our values. Something is out of balance there. What is getting in the way? What is getting in the way? Now you could ask, what is getting in the way of me living in alignment with my values? What is getting in the way of anything, right? What is getting in the way of my health right now? What is getting in the way of, me getting my notes done, right? What is in the way here, right? It's an important question. What is true right now? This is a powerful one as well. What is true right now, right? When we're feeling overwhelmed or swamped, when we're feeling frustrated or mad, what is actually true? We might be telling ourselves lots of stories. Again, we won't gaslight ourselves into, thinking that we're wrong, that we're terrible people that make up all these things, right? But we often have a lot of story, especially if we are tired and frustrated and burned out, about other people doing things to us that isn't helping us to feel better, right? So what is true right now? If I had more time, what would I do with it? And is that really true? So this happens a lot where we think if I had more time, I would sleep more. I would spend it with my family. And yet sometimes when we do have more time, we don't actually follow through with that. That's complicated, right? Because we are usually trying to numb out emotions if we are not following through with whatever the thing is that we are feeling in value. But if we don't ask ourselves the questions, right? If we don't get curious and figure out what is in the way of, me doing the thing and, believing the story that I don't have the time to do it, we will uncover patterns and things that we are staying stuck in. Again, you can see that in some of these questions, it might be very easy to gaslight ourselves into thinking that we are the problem. But until we sort of shine the light and see what is going on in our thoughts, in our heads, in our lived experience, we can't really make progress. We will stay stuck, right? So come at this with curiosity and compassion. Who do I want to be here? Who do I want to be here? Where am I not being honest with myself? Where am I not being honest with someone important in my life? What is meaningful to me? What brings me joy? What is one thing that I will do for myself today? What was hard today? What was good today? What am I proud of today? What will I celebrate today? You can see that there is a very wide mix of questions here. And again, this list is by no means exhaustive. You don't have to do anything with my list. That is just the list of questions that I wrote down to get us started. You might take some of those questions that you like and choose to start some kind of a practice where you check in with yourself on a day-to-day basis. These last ones here, what was hard today? What was good today? What am I proud of today? Those might be a great place to start and just come to it every single day. And by every single day, I mean as many days as you can remember and get it done, right? Um, I joke with my patients, when they tell me, I ask them, are you taking any vitamins, herbs, or supplements? And they'll say, well, I sometimes take a multivitamin. And I say, if you're taking it 4 or 5 days a week, we count that as gold stars, right? We count that as good enough because that is lots of days of the week, right? The same applies to a journaling practice. If you are doing that lots of days of the week, I am amazed and proud, and we call that good enough, right? But if you want to start getting more curious about yourself, helping yourself to figure out what it is that you are feeling, what it is that you are thinking, those 3 questions are a great place to start really exploring, kind of what goes on in your day. When we start building an intentional practice where we're checking in with each other, with ourselves rather, whether that's journaling practice or just asking yourself the question. Maybe you pull into the driveway when you get home and you just ask yourself the question, what was hard today? What was good today? What am I proud of today? Right? You are just choosing to tune in to your lived experience, to be more present in your own life. And that can be tremendously powerful for people. Don't discount the importance of simple steps like that in order to, learn to know ourselves better and to figure out what we need, right? If you find yourself saying every single day, what was hard about my day was closing my notes. What was hard about my day was the constant interruptions. What was hard about my day was, people constantly double booking my schedule, right? If you notice that is a pattern and you can see that very clearly, you have the ability to take better action for it than, if you are less specific with yourself, right? If you can recognize the things that were good today and, maybe that allows you to start tuning into nice moments with other humans, right? Whether that's patients, whether that's your kids, whether that's staff, whether that's the person who makes your coffee in the morning, right? If we can start tuning in and noticing that, then we are more present and we are happier, more fulfilled, right? It's a simple little step. What am I proud of today? Can you start to look every day for something that you are proud of so that you recognize how much good work you do in the world, right? How hard you work. Although let's get away from taking that as a measure of our worth, right? But how you stopped and you asked the right question to the person who really needed you. How um, you chose to take a break, right, rather than hustle. That you stood up for yourself, that you set a boundary, right? We could be proud of ourselves for any number that you did a 15-minute workout when you've been really trying to work out more and you told yourself that that wasn't good enough, but you went and did 15 minutes and we're proud of you for showing up for that 15 minutes, right? You can see how asking yourself these simple questions can really start to open up your experience. You can start to recognize, where you are showing up in a way that you like. You can recognize where you're struggling and where you might need more support or help, or want to set a boundary, or want to get more help, or want to make a change. Get curious, my friends. That is your challenge for this week. That is how we are rounding out this 10-week challenge. Again, if you would like to start over or go back to the beginning, you'll want to check out episode 200 from October 28th, 2025, and you can start all the way from the beginning. A lot of this challenge has been informed by the book, The Telomere Effect. I do highly recommend it, and you can find your copy in my online bookshop at bookshop.org, where I have other recommendations for other great books that I highly recommend for women physicians. My friends, this brings us to the end of 2025. It's been quite a year. I thank you so much for being here with me. Our ability to connect in this way, our ability to really talk and reflect on what is important makes a huge difference, right? When we can feel seen and heard as individuals, when we can start to recognize what we're experiencing and validate ourselves, right? We give ourselves agency. That is the work that I hope that you find through listening to the podcast. I thank you so much for your support of the show. And I can't wait to see what the new year brings. So don't forget to tune in. We're releasing new episodes every Tuesday. Again, you can go back to the start of the Recharge Challenge, which was episode 200, which is October 28th. And until next year, take care and be well. Well, that's our show for today. Thank you as always for listening. To learn more about my coaching programs, head to www.healthierforgood.com. And if you love this podcast, please drop us a review on iTunes or support the show by clicking the link in the show notes. Until next time, take care.